Tonight, you know how to make glass that no one else in the world can replicate. You will carry this knowledge for the rest of your life. The only question is, where? Welcome to Quiet History at Bedtime, where real history becomes the world you fall asleep inside. This channel is still very new, and if you find something here worth staying for, please consider subscribing, leaving a like, and turning on notifications. It means a great deal. Everything you are about to hear is based on real historical facts, grounded in research and current academic understanding. Just relax and feel free to let this play as you drift off to sleep. Now, let us begin. You are 38 years old. You were born on this island, and your father was born on this island, and his father before him. The island is called Murano. It sits in the northern part of the Venetian Lagoon, roughly 1.5 miles from the city of Venice itself. Close enough that on a clear morning you can see the bell towers rising above the mist, pale and distant as a painting you will never walk into. You have crossed to Venice perhaps 12 times in your entire life, always with permission, always with an escort, always returned before the evening bells rang. You do not think of yourself as a prisoner, or rather, you do, but not in any way that changes what you do each morning when you rise before the light and walk to your workshop. You are a maestro vetraio, a master glassblower. The title was given to you 14 years ago, when you completed your apprenticeship under your father, and it carries more legal weight on this island than almost any other title a man of your birth could hold. The maestri of Murano are permitted by decree to marry into the Venetian nobility. The Senate of the Republic established this privilege in 1295, the same year it ordered all the island's glass furnaces moved here from the city. The skills your hands carry are worth more to the Republic than a clean bloodline, and the Republic does not pretend otherwise. You have not married into the nobility. You married Caterina, the daughter of a bead maker on the island's east side, and you have 3 children, a daughter, Marta, who is 12 years old, a son, Niccolo, who is 9, and a boy not yet 4, who everyone calls Tino, because he cannot yet say his full given name without stumbling on it. Your workshop is attached to the back of your house. The furnace inside never goes entirely cold. Your name tonight does not matter. Tonight you are the hands, the breath, the rotation, the heat, the glass. The morning starts before the sun. You wake in darkness to the sound of a furnace across the canal. You have learned to read the night by sound, the deep, steady roar of a furnace held at full working temperature, the lower, slower muttering when it has been banked for the late hours, and the subtle shift in pitch when a maestro or his assistant comes in early and begins bringing the fire back up before dawn. That pitch shift is what has pulled you awake now. Someone across the water is already gathering. You pull the blanket free and sit up on the edge of the bed. The floor beneath your feet is cold. Not surprisingly, it is late in the month of February, in the year 1483, and the lagoon in February holds a cold that comes not from the air above, but from the water itself. deep, damp, and without the softness of a landlocked cold. You dress in the dark, linen against the skin, wool on top of that, then the heavy leather apron that hangs from a peg beside the workshop door. The apron is burned along the left side from a gather that swung free 2 winters ago and dropped against it. You have not replaced it. You will not replace it until it fails. The workshop door opens into heat. This is the thing that no one who has never worked glass would understand. The cold of the island and the heat of the furnace are not 2 separate worlds you move between. They are 2 sides of the same day, held in the same body. You step through the doorway and the temperature rises 40 degrees, and you do not flinch. You read the room. You read the furnace. Your furnace is a wood-fired reverberatory furnace. It stands at the center of the workshop, roughly circular at its base, and a little under 6 feet tall at the crown. Inside it, nested into the heat chamber at the core, sit 3 clay crucibles. 2 of them hold the main glass batch: silica sand from the riverbeds of the Ticino, soda ash imported from the Levant, and a carefully measured portion of manganese oxide. The 3rd crucible holds latimo glass, the opaque white material made with tin oxide, used for the decorative threadwork in filigrana pieces. The main batch has been melting since yesterday afternoon. It has had 14 hours. You check it through the gathering hole in the furnace wall. The glass inside is liquid, not water liquid. The motion is thick, slow, viscous in a way that still, after 20 years of daily work, carries a specific weight in your attention. You look at the color near the surface. Toward the edges of the batch, where it has not yet fully clarified, there is a faint greenish cast. This is the iron in the sand. It is always there in every batch, and it is the reason for the manganese. Manganese oxide, added in the right proportion to the batch before melting, acts as a decolorizer. It counteracts the iron impurity and draws the green from the glass, leaving it clear. Too little manganese and your glass carries that green shadow. Too much, and it turns violet. You have measured the proportion by hand so many times that your hands know the weight before your eyes confirm it. The glass you are making is called Cristallo. Angelo Baroviere of this island developed the full method for producing true Cristallo. Glass clear and thin enough to let light pass as if through nothing at all. Not 30 years ago. Baroviere worked perhaps 2 streets from where your workshop now stands. He did not publish his method. He did not file it with any authority. He passed it in the way all knowledge passes on Murano, through the hands and eyes of the men who worked beside him, and through his children, and it did not go anywhere else. You learned the method from your father, who learned it from a man who apprenticed alongside one of Baroviere's contemporaries. The chain between you and the source is 3 links long. This knowledge does not leave the island. This is not poetry. This is law. You lift your blowpipe from the rack along the workshop wall. It is an iron tube 5 feet long with a wooden mouthpiece wrapped in several layers of bound cloth to protect your lips from the heat that travels down the metal during working. The pipe weighs several pounds. You stopped noticing this weight perhaps in your second year of serious work, but a new apprentice always struggles with it. The arms compensating for a weight the muscles have not yet absorbed. The shoulders aching at the end of the day in the specific way of someone doing unfamiliar labor. You remember watching this in Marco when he first came to you. You remember it without sentimentality. The weight is part of the work, and the work does not adjust itself to accommodate. You carry the pipe to the furnace. The working end goes into the gathering hole, the opening in the furnace wall through which you access the molten glass directly. You rotate the pipe in the surface of the batch, gathering a small amount of molten glass onto the tip. This first gather of the morning is not a finished piece. This is a reading. Every morning the glass tells you slightly different things. The temperature of the previous night, the quality of the firewood in the previous charge, the exact ratios of the batch, the humidity coming off the lagoon. You need to understand today's glass before you attempt anything from it. You bring the pipe to the braccio, the low iron working bench positioned beside the furnace, and sit down. You blow gently through the mouthpiece. A small bubble forms at the end of the pipe. You rotate constantly. A glassblower who stops rotating loses the gather. Gravity pulls molten glass downward, and the piece sags and fails. The rotation is the first thing you teach, and it becomes automatic in the first year of apprenticeship, or it does not become anything. The test gather expands slowly. You watch the wall of the glass where the morning light begins to catch it. At working temperature inside the furnace, the glass is somewhere above 1,000 degrees. In the open air at the bench, you have perhaps 30 to 50 seconds of clean working time before the piece begins to stiffen past the point of easy shaping. When that threshold approaches, you return the piece to the furnace opening, the glory hole, to reheat. You do this many times for each finished piece. The rhythm of the work is gather, blow, shape, reheat, shape, transfer, finish, anneal. Piece by piece, all through the working hours. This morning's glass is good, well clarified, responsive to the breath, holding its form cleanly as it expands. You drop the test piece into the cullet bucket near the base of the furnace. Cullet, broken and waste glass, is added to every new batch as a flux to lower the melting point of the raw materials. Nothing is discarded here. Failed pieces, waste drops, the cull of a cracked goblet. It all goes back into the crucible eventually. This island does not waste what is in the crucibles. You go to the workshop door and call for Marco. Marco arrives within a few minutes, tying his apron over his shoulders as he crosses the floor. He is 16, tall now and broad through the shoulders in the way of boys who are becoming men without having quite finished the transition. His hands are developing correctly. The calluses have formed in the right places, thickened along the inner thumb where the blowpipe rests during rotation, smooth and slightly ridged at the heel of the palm. He has been with you for 3 years. In another year, you will let him attempt his own goblets under your watch. Not filigrana work. Basic pieces first, and only after every basic piece is clean. Behind Marco comes Giacomo, who is 13 and has been in the workshop less than a year. Giacomo's work right now is to watch, carry, sweep, and count. He does all of this quietly and in the right order, which is more than you can say for every boy who has passed through this workshop in the last 20 years. When he is ready, you will tell him, not with words, you will hand him the pipe. The batch is ready, you tell Marco. He nods once. He already knew. The commission you are filling arrived 10 days ago through the intermediary merchant who carries orders between the island's maestri and the buyers in Venice. The order is for 12 goblets, cristallo, with white latimo threading worked through the walls in a regular helix. This technique is called filigrana, from the Latin filigranum, meaning thread grain. It requires two separate glass elements, the clear cristallo body of the goblet, and thin rods of opaque white latimo that must be pressed against the hot blank and incorporated into the walls before the final inflation. A piece of filigrana done correctly takes between 40 minutes and an hour of working time. Done incorrectly, it cracks overnight in the annealing oven, and you begin again. You have 3 days to fill a commission of 12. You have prepared extra latimo rods. You have checked the crucibles. You have read this morning's glass. You take the first full gather. The gather for a goblet is larger than the test gather, enough molten glass to form the body of the piece. You bring it to the braccio and sit. The work begins properly now. First, you blow the gather into a rough cylinder. This is called the initial blowing. You are not shaping the goblet yet. You are establishing the blank, a regular, evenly walled form of hot glass from which the goblet can be developed. If the blank is uneven to begin with, everything that follows will be compensating for that unevenness, and compensation is the enemy of a clean piece. Your blank must be even before anything else happens. You reheat. At the glory hole, the radiant heat of the furnace presses against your face and arms with a physical weight. Your eyebrows have been reduced to a faint line above each eye for as long as you can remember. You do not think about this. The maestri you grew up watching all had the same absent brows, the same reddened forearms below the short sleeves of their work shirts, the same slight narrowing of the eyes from years of looking into open furnaces. These are the marks of the trade. They accumulate so slowly you do not notice them on yourself. You notice them on others, and then one day, a stranger looks at you across a canal, and you understand from the way he looks that he can read the trade in your face. Back to the bench. Now you place the latimo rods. These are the white glass threads that will form the decorative pattern in the goblet's walls. Each rod is about 8 inches long and 1/4 of an inch thick, made from the latimo batch in the 3rd crucible. They were prepared during the previous session and are now cool and solid, lying in a row on the edge of the braccio. Their whiteness is not the pure white of paper or cloth. It has the faint warmth of bone, a creaminess that comes from the tin oxide that makes the glass opaque. You place them against the outer surface of the hot blank, one by one, pressing each gently against the glass with the wooden paddle, evenly spaced around the circumference. 8 rods for a goblet of this diameter. Each one must be exactly equidistant from the next. If they are not, the finished piece will show it. The helix will be uneven, wider in some places and narrower in others. And a buyer who knows Murano glass will see this immediately. They will not say anything. They will simply not place another order. The bonding of the Latimo rods to the hot blank is a matter of surface temperature and timing. The hot blank touches the cooler rod. For a moment there is resistance. The materials are the same substance at different temperatures, and they briefly resist each other before the heat transfers. The surfaces fuse, and they become one. You have pressed hundreds of Latimo rods against hundreds of blanks. You do not think about the timing. Your hands know it. You blow. The blank expands. The Latimo rods stretch with it, thinning as the glass wall thins, each rod becoming a thread rather than a rod, curving around the exterior of the growing bubble. As you rotate the pipe, the threads begin to spiral. This is the helical pattern that defines filigrana, and the speed of your rotation controls the angle of the spiral. Faster rotation, tighter helix. Slower rotation, wider and more open. The customer has not specified a particular twist angle. They have specified filigrana. The angle you choose is yours. You choose the same angle you always choose, because it is the one that looks, to your eye, most like what the glass wants to do when it is handled this way. After 20 years, you do not choose it consciously. You arrive at it. You reheat twice more before the goblet body reaches the right size and proportion. Then the shaping proper. Using the jacks, two-handled iron tools that work like broad tongs with flat ends, used to pinch and form the soft glass from the outside, you begin to open the top of the blank into the cup of the goblet. You draw the walls upward and outward, creating the depth of the bowl. You work fast. The glass is cooling. You have perhaps 20 seconds of good working time before the piece stiffens past the point where the jacks can move it cleanly. You true the rim. With the jacks held at a shallow angle, you draw the lip outward slightly, thinning the rim toward near transparency. This final thinning is where the piece becomes fine rather than merely competent. A thick rim is workmanlike. A thin rim is mastery. The rim is the last thing a person touches when they drink from a goblet. It is the thing they feel before they taste anything. Your father understood this. You understand it. You have never had to say it to Marco, because Marco has seen your rims and he knows. Then the transfer. The transfer from blowpipe to pontil, the solid iron rod used to hold the base of the goblet while you finish the rim, requires two pairs of hands. Marco takes the blowpipe, you hold the pontil, with a small gather of hot glass at its end against the base of the goblet. For a moment the piece is held between you, suspended between two irons in the open air of the workshop, still above 500 degrees, still capable of movement. You press the pontil gather to the base. It bonds. You score the blowpipe end with a wetted wooden tool and tap it sharply. The pipe releases. The goblet is now held at its base from the pontil. You reheat the rim one more time, a brief pass at the glory hole, just enough to bring it back to working temperature, and then finish the flare with a final pass of the jacks. Even around the full circumference, thin enough to carry light, consistent with the rims of the 11 other goblets you will make this week. You carry the goblet to the annealing oven at the back of the workshop. The annealing oven, sometimes called the arca, sometimes the lair, is a separate and lower temperature furnace maintained at roughly 500 degrees, far cooler than the main working furnace. Its purpose is not to melt or shape, but to hold the finished piece at a temperature high enough to relieve the internal stresses that form during rapid cooling. Glass cooled too quickly develops invisible fractures, not visible, not cracked on the surface, but structurally compromised, waiting for a moment of handling or a change in temperature to release. This release is a crack. You do not send cracked glass. You do not send glass that will crack next week in a Venetian palace. The annealing oven is as important as the furnace. It is where the piece becomes permanent. You place the goblet on the iron shelf inside. You close the inspection port. It is not yet full morning. The tools on the rack beside the braccio have their own names and their own history of use. The borsella, the broad-ended shaping tongs, what some workshops call jacks, are the primary shaping instrument, the tool that opens the bowl of the goblet and trues the rim. The tagliante is the cutting tool, a flat iron blade used to score the glass where it must be separated from the pipe. The padella, the wooden paddle, is worn smooth along one working edge from perhaps 10,000 pressings of latimo rods against hot glass. 3 pontal irons hang in order of size, small, medium, large, for transferring pieces of different weights and proportions. None of these tools are exotic. An ironmonger on the island's south side makes them to specification. What makes them effective is not the tools themselves, but the hands that have learned, over years that cannot be shortened, precisely what to do with them and when. Marco spent his first 3 months in this workshop learning the names of the tools before he was allowed to pick up the blowpipe. This is not universal practice among the island's maestri. Some begin their apprentices on the pipe much sooner, arguing that hands-on learning is faster than observation. You disagree. A boy who does not know the name of the padella and what it is for will not understand when you tell him to press the latimo rods, why he is pressing them in that direction with that particular force. A boy who knows the tool knows the reason behind the instruction. Marco knew all the tools within 6 weeks. You drink from a clay cup on the shelf near the door. The water is cold. You hold it in both hands and feel the cold moving through your palms, which are dry and slightly papery from the heat. The skin of a glassblower's palm ages differently from other skin, not calloused in the way of a laborer who grips and pulls, but toughened in a different way, the surface smooth and thickened from years of radiant heat rather than friction. Your hands are 38 years old in the particular way of a maestro's hands, and that is different from being 38 in any other trade. Marco and Giacomo are preparing the second gather. Marco does the gathering. Giacomo positions the latimo rods for the next piece and counts them against the number on the slate. You have told Giacomo to count the rods every time. He does this without being reminded. This matters more than it sounds. An apprentice who does what he is told without being reminded 3 times first is an apprentice who will one day be a maestro. Through the small window above the door, the gray February light has strengthened. The canal outside the workshop shows movement now. A boat carrying firewood moving slowly, the boatman standing at the stern with the oar resting in the water. Murano burns a great deal of wood. Every working furnace on the island draws from the same supply of imported timber, carried across the lagoon from the mainland. The logistics of fueling the island's furnaces are managed by a merchant consortium that negotiates with suppliers in the Trevigiano. You do not manage this. You specify what you need, and most of the time it arrives. The island has roughly 5,000 inhabitants in this year of 1483. Almost all of them are here because of glass. The furnaces were moved to Murano from Venice in 1291 by decree of the Senate. The reason given was fire safety. The wood-burning furnaces of Venice's glassmakers were a hazard in a city built of wood and stone and surrounded by water with no space to spare. This was true. It was also convenient. Murano was close enough to Venice to be governed, far enough to be an effective enclosure. The artisans were told to come. The ones who did not come eventually did. The Republic does not make requests twice, and it does not explain them a second time either. In exchange for the confinement, the maestri received certain privileges that no other artisan class in the Republic possessed. The right to intermarry with the Venetian nobility, the right to carry a sword, normally restricted to members of the nobility and certain officials, the right to be tried before the island's own podestà for ordinary crimes rather than in the Venetian courts, the right to their own merchants' guild, the Arte dei Vetrai, with its own seal and regulations and internal hierarchy of maestri, journeymen, and apprentices. These were not small things. The right to carry a sword in 14th century Venice meant something precise. It meant the Republic acknowledged you as a man whose knowledge was worth protecting, whose person had strategic value, whose status in the legal hierarchy had been formally elevated above your birth. A man of your background, in any other trade, would carry no sword and marry no noblewoman and appear before no local magistrate. He would be exactly where his birth placed him, and no higher. You are higher. You are also here. The glass made on this island reaches places you have never seen and will never see. You know this from what the intermediary merchants tell you, and from what the orders themselves reveal. There are regular commissions from Florentine merchant families connected to the banking houses, buyers who purchase Murano Cristallo for display and for gifts to other powerful families. There are orders from the courts of Northern Europe, sometimes placed by agents who travel to Venice and then cross the lagoon to Murano with specific requests. Goblets for a German court, mirrors for a French household, blue glass pieces for a collector in the Low Countries, whose agent describes his employer's preferences in careful written Latin. The glass travels by ship and by road, and arrives eventually in rooms you cannot picture, handled by people who do not think about Murano, or about the furnace, or about your hands. Venice holds a monopoly on high-quality mirrors. This is not an accident. The mirrors made on this island, clear, flat glass with a backing of tin and mercury amalgam that produces a reflection of unprecedented accuracy, are possible because of the same glass-making knowledge that produces your Cristallo. The clear, flat glass needed for a good mirror requires Levantine soda ash, careful decolorization, precise furnace management. The technique for applying the amalgam backing is a separate secret held by the mirror-making families of the island, the way you hold your own formulas. The workshop 3 streets north belongs to the Serena family, who have made mirrors here for 2 generations. Matteo Serena is perhaps 40 years old, and you have spoken with him perhaps 20 times in your life, mostly at the island's small market on feast days. You understand from these conversations, without either of you saying it directly, that his situation on the island is substantially the same as yours, the same framework, the same privileges, the same walls. The beads manufactured on Murano are a different trade entirely. Small glass beads made in enormous quantities by a separate workforce of women and children working in the island's cottages and smaller workshops. These beads are not cristallo. They are not filigrana. They are simple glass formed into small round shapes, and they are made by the millions and traded across Africa and Asia and the Eastern Mediterranean in exchange for spices, cloth, and currency. In sheer volume, they dwarf the fine glasswork by orders of magnitude. In price per piece, they are worth very little each. In aggregate, they support a large portion of the island's non-maestro population. You have nothing to do with the bead trade. You do not think about it most days. The arte dei vetri governs the internal affairs of the glass trade on the island. It sets the standards for apprenticeship, 7 years minimum before a man can call himself a maestro, though in practice the serious workshops run longer. It mediates disputes between masters. It controls, in theory, the flow of information about glass-making methods, the recipes, the temperatures, the specific combinations of materials that produce different kinds of glass. In practice, controlling the flow of information within a trade where everyone works within earshot of everyone else is impossible, and the arte knows it. The real control is external. The real control is the Council of 10. The Council of 10 is the Republic's enforcement body for matters of state security. It is a permanent magistracy, founded in 1310, and it handles, among its many responsibilities, the protection of Venice's most valuable commercial secrets. The glass formulas of Murano are among these secrets. The Council treats them accordingly. You do not think about the Council of 10 every day. You think about it the way you think about the tide, not constantly, but always with the awareness that it is there, that it moves on its own schedule, and that there are consequences for being on the water when it turns. The second goblet takes slightly longer than the first. Not because anything goes wrong. Nothing goes wrong. The Latimo rods bond cleanly. The blank inflates evenly. The helix angle is consistent with the first piece. But you are relearning the morning's glass. Every day the material is slightly different, and every day the first hour is a process of recalibration, hands and glass arriving at an understanding of each other. By the second piece, the understanding is established. The hands know. You carry it to the annealing oven, 2 down. Marco is working his own practice blank at the second position on the braccio. He is attempting something today that he has not attempted before, a double-walled piece, 2 layers of glass inflated separately and then joined at the base and rim. This is not a commissioned technique. It is an exercise you have set him, not because any customer has asked for this particular form, but because the skills it requires, the precise timing of 2 separate gathers, the control of wall thickness in both layers, the management of the transfer when there are 2 overlapping surfaces to bond, are skills that transfer to advanced filigrana work. You do not tell Marco why you have set this exercise. He works the problem in front of him. Giacomo is watching Marco with the focused, slightly anxious attention of a boy who understands that what he is watching is the thing he will eventually have to do. You begin the third goblet. By mid-morning, you have 4 finished pieces in the annealing oven and are working on the 5th. The soda ash in the batch is from the Levant, from the coastal salt marshes of Syria and Egypt, carried to Venice on trade ships, and then brought by smaller boat to the island. Venetian merchants call it cali or barilla, depending on its origin and quality, and the best grade, the kind that produces the clearest, most stable cristallo, costs considerably more than the domestic wood ash potash that other glassmakers in less regulated trades use. You can see the difference in the glass. You can see it in the way the batch clarifies, in the melting behavior, in the final clearness of the finished piece. A goblet made with Levantine soda ash and a goblet made with potash are not the same goblet. The buyer who has bought Murano Cristallo for 20 years knows this. You know it. The cost of the soda ash is a cost of being what you are. The manganese that decolorizes your batch comes from German suppliers, from the mineral deposits in the Erzgebirge, the ore mountains on the border of Bohemia and Saxony. It reaches Venice via the Alpine trade routes that have functioned in various forms since the Romans. The tin oxide for the Latimo is imported through different channels. The cobalt that makes deep blue glass, Venice blue, Murano blue, the color that when you hold it to the light looks like the center of a clear sky seen through water, comes from Saxony as well, a compound called smalt ground from cobalt-bearing mineral. These materials move through the Republic's trade networks the way all materials do, slowly, expensively, across distances that you know only as the names of places you have never seen. The 5th goblet comes off the pontal clean. The threading is even. The rim is correct. You are carrying it to the annealing oven when the knock comes. 2 sharp, formal knocks at the workshop door. Not a neighbor, not the firewood boat. You know before you have crossed the floor. You open the door. The man outside is perhaps 50 years old, dressed in dark broadcloth, his collar plain, his expression neutral. Beside him stands a younger man who says nothing and writes nothing, but whose eyes move carefully around the workshop as he stands at the threshold. The older man identifies himself as a representative of the Signori di Notte, the Lords of the Night, one of the Republic's several magistracies, responsible, among other things, for the enforcement of the laws governing Murano's artisans and their movement. "You knew Benedetto Rosso," he says. Not a question. You place the name without visible effort. Benedetto had a workshop 3 bridges south, on the near side of the main canal. He was perhaps 45 years old, a specialist in colored glass, deep reds made with copper oxide, warm ambers, and a specific ochre tone that he produced by combining iron and sulfur in proportions no other maestro on the island had quite replicated, though several had tried. The ochre was his particular achievement. You had spoken with Benedetto perhaps a dozen times in the last 2 years. Furnace management mostly, the behavior of different wood types on combustion temperature, the lifespan of different clay crucible compositions. Technical conversation. Nothing more. "I knew him," you say. "He left the island," the official says, 14 days ago, without authorization. The younger man's eyes have reached the shelf of cross-section rings above the braccio. He looks at them for a moment without expression, then looks away. I have had no contact with him in several months, you say. This is true. We spoke occasionally about furnace management. I had no knowledge that he intended to leave. Do you have any knowledge of his destination? No. Did he discuss any dissatisfaction with his situation on the island? With the conditions of his work? With any person or institution? Nothing of the kind, you say. The official nods slowly. He does not write anything down. The younger man's gaze has moved to the annealing oven at the back of the workshop. You do not follow his eyes. You keep your attention on the official. If you should learn anything regarding his whereabouts or regarding any contact he may have made prior to his departure, you are expected to report it to the Podesta's office within 1 day. Of course, you say. They leave. You stand in the open doorway for a moment after their footsteps have receded. The February air comes into the workshop cold and flat. Across the canal, someone's chimney releases a thin line of smoke from a kitchen fire. A gull sits on the near edge of the opposite wall, not moving, watching the water below with the patient attention that only birds and certain kinds of tired people manage. You close the door. Marco is at the braccio with the pipe, the gather cooling in his hands as he waits. Giacomo is very still at the corner of the bench. Neither of them asks anything. The gather, you say to Marco. He begins to rotate. You take your place at the bench beside him and watch him work. He is shaping a practice cylinder. You have set him an exercise today. Not a commission piece, just a plain, blown form with an even wall and an even base. He is doing this correctly. His rotation is steady. His breath is measured and consistent. He is not letting the weight of the last 10 minutes enter his hands. You notice this. You do not remark on it. The time for remarking will come. This is also part of the work, perhaps the part that takes the longest to teach fully, longer even than the technical skills, the ability to close a door between what is happening outside the workshop and what is happening at the bench. The furnace does not stop for visitors. The glass does not wait for your attention to return. Whatever arrives at the door, whatever name is spoken on the other side of it, whatever moves across the lagoon out there in the gray February light, inside the workshop, the glass is the authority. You believe this. You have always believed it. You believe it with a conviction that is not pride, but something closer to necessity. You pick up the pipe for the 6th goblet. The afternoon passes in the rhythm of the work. Gather, blow, bench, reheat, shape, transfer, anneal. The 6th goblet is clean. The 7th goblet is the best piece of the day. The threading even from base to rim, the helix angle consistent, the walls thin enough that when you hold it briefly to the glory hole and look through it, each white thread appears in clean relief against the orange light, like lines drawn by someone who has no hesitation in them. You carry it to the annealing oven without allowing yourself to look at it again. Looking too long at a good piece is a kind of temptation. It makes you want to adjust something, improve something, and by the time you have decided it needed nothing, you have reheated it once too many times, and the piece is worse than before you looked. Into the oven, you do not look. The eighth goblet gives you trouble. One of the Latimo rods shifts during the initial inflation. Not much, only slightly, but it draws close enough to its neighbor that the two threads arrive at the upper quarter of the goblet wall in near convergence before separating again. The deviation is perhaps a quarter of an inch at its widest point. A buyer who had never owned Murano glass would not notice it. A patrician household that has been collecting this work for 3 generations, that has sets of 12 matching goblets on shelves in rooms you will never enter, they will see it immediately. They will not say anything about it. They will simply not place another order. You stand with the piece in your hand and look at it in the light from the window for a long moment. You put it in the cullet bucket. Marco watches this without speaking. Giacomo looks at the bucket and then at you. Neither asks. You begin the 9th goblet. Between pieces, while the gather reheats at the glory hole, you think about the raw materials in the batch. The silica sand is from the riverbeds of the Ticino, not just any sand, but a specific grade with low iron content. Important because even small amounts of iron add the green shadow that the manganese then has to counteract. Finding low iron sand is not straightforward, and the suppliers who provide it know this and price it accordingly. Before the Ticino sources were established, Murano glassmakers used river sand from the Brenta, but the iron content varied too much from one load to the next. Consistency is everything. The batch must be the same batch every time, or as close to the same as the variable world allows. You have memorized the batch ratios the way you have memorized everything important in your working life. Not by writing them down, but by repetition until the knowledge lives in the body and no longer requires the mind to retrieve it. The ratios are in your hands when you weigh the components. Your father's ratios, refined slightly by your own years of observation. The refinements are yours. You have not told Marco the specific numbers yet. He will learn them when he is ready, which is when you decide he is ready, which has not happened yet. The 9th and 10th goblets come off the pontal clean. You carry them to the oven. 10 pieces now. 2 more to make, plus whatever extras the attrition of the annealing oven demands. You will know in the morning what the oven has decided about the pieces inside it. Some will survive without change. Some will have developed hairline fractures overnight, not always visible immediately, sometimes only revealing themselves when you pick them up and the light catches the glass at a particular angle. You budget for this. You always make more than you need. You begin the 11th piece near the end of the afternoon, when the light through the small window has shifted from gray-white to the lower, warmer angle of a February late afternoon. Your hands are tired in the specific way of a long day at the furnace. The rotation motion is as natural as breathing, but the sustained attention required to maintain it over many hours accumulates. Not in the muscles. The muscles are used to this. In the eyes. In the particular kind of stillness required to watch the glass tell you what it needs at each moment of the shaping. You reheat the 11th piece and carry it to the bench, and make it with the same attention you brought to the first piece this morning. It is good. You bank the furnace for the evening. This begins with the ash. You draw the accumulated ash in the firebox forward and over the remaining embers, covering them partially, insulating them, reducing the oxygen that reaches them, bringing the combustion rate down toward a long, slow maintenance burn. Then you adjust the vents in the furnace body, the upper vents partially closed to reduce the draft. The lower vents set to maintain just enough airflow for combustion without driving it toward working temperature. A correctly banked furnace holds viable heat through 8 hours. The glass in the crucibles will remain liquid, or liquid enough, through the night without further attention. In the morning, you will add wood and bring it back to working temperature before the first gather. You bank the furnace with the same care you bring to every banking. You have done this perhaps 2,000 times. A carelessly banked furnace, the vents a little too closed, the ash layer a little thin on one side, loses heat through the night and confronts you in the morning with a workshop that is cooled further than it should, glass that needs longer to return to working temperature, an hour of the morning lost before you can begin. You have done this once. The loss of the hour, the reset of the day's rhythm, the specific frustration of beginning behind. You have not done it again. You check the annealing oven before you leave the workshop. Through the inspection port, in the orange warmth of the oven interior, 11 goblets sit in a row on the iron shelves. Their latimo threading glows faintly in the heat light. 11 pieces, each one slightly different from the others in the exact angle of the twist, the precise degree of flare at the rim. They are not identical. They came from the same hands, the same glass, the same furnace, the same day, and they are still not identical. This is not a flaw. You close the port. Marco locks the workshop door. Giacomo notes the latimo rod count on the slate, sets the slate on the shelf where you will see it in the morning, and thanks you for the day. You nod at him. He goes. You take off the apron and hang it on its peg. The evening meal is at the table in the main room. You and Katerina and the 3 children. Bread, salt fish, beans cooked soft with rosemary, wine mixed with water. The table is covered with the cloth that comes out only at mealtimes. The candle is at the center. Outside, the canal is darkening, and the sound of the water has changed in the way it always changes after full dark. Quieter, more contained, as if the darkness has drawn the noise inward. Katerina asks how many goblets are done. 11, you say. 12 tomorrow morning, plus any that don't survive the oven tonight. She nods. She manages the household accounts without involving you in the details, which is the arrangement you have both preferred since before you were married. The accounts are hers. The glass is yours. Between the two of you, the household functions without either of you having to do the other's work. Marta asks about the visitors. She is 12 and she heard the knock from upstairs because Marta hears most things she is not supposed to hear, and she saw you standing in the doorway for a moment after they left, which was visible from the landing. A routine matter, you say. It is not quite true. You both know it is not quite true. You do not push it further, and neither does she. Tino is banging the table with his cup. Niccolo is eating steadily without looking up, in the focused way of a 9-year-old who is very hungry and not interested in conversation until the hunger is addressed. After dinner, Niccolo comes to sit beside you while you finish the wine. He does not ask anything. He leans against your side in the way children do at the edge of sleep, not quite there yet, but moving toward it, the weight of him becoming gradually heavier against your arm. He has been awake since before the sun, and he is very close to the end of this day. You put your hand on his back briefly. He does not register it outwardly. Outside, the lagoon is dark. The furnaces of the island breathe all through the night, even when you are not there to hear them. Not loudly, not intrusively, but as a presence beneath the silence, a warmth in the air that you have known since before you understood what produced it. Your father's furnace breathed the same way. His father's furnace before that. The same fire, essentially, banked and rebuilt and banked and rebuilt in an unbroken line going back further than anyone on this island can trace. You carry Niccolo upstairs. He is heavier than he looks, the particular dense weight of a sleeping child, all slack and warm. You lay him on the pallet and cover him, and he does not wake. You stand in the doorway for a moment. Tino is already asleep in the corner, breathing fast and even the way the very young breathe, as if sleep is something they fall into rather than approach. Marta's room is across the narrow landing, a strip of candlelight still at the base of her door. You go to your room. You lie down, and the cold of the sheets moves through the blanket, and then slowly stops moving as your body claims the space beneath it. Your shoulders ache in the right shoulder from the rotation, in the left from the long reach into the glory hole. Your right thumb where the pipe rests during the sustained work of a full-day session. Your forearms. The small aches are a kind of record, the body's account of what was done today and how much of it there was. 11 goblets. You think about Benedetto for a moment, not with fear, with something quieter than fear. He was 45 years old, and he had been on this island for all of those years, and 14 days ago he left without authorization. You do not know where he went. You do not know if he is across the Alps by now, in some German city, standing at a foreign furnace with foreign sand and foreign batch, and trying to reconstruct from memory the formulas that lived for 30 years in his hands. You do not know if the Republic's agents found him before he reached the mainland. The Republic has employed agents in the port cities for this purpose for as long as you can remember. The glass secrets of Murano are worth a great deal to the Republic, and the Republic invests accordingly in their protection. The island itself is small enough to walk across in less than half an hour. 7 bridges connect the 2 main sections across the central canal. There are 17 churches, a covered market, the Podesta's administrative building with its modest loggia, the houses of the maestri clustered along the better canals, the smaller houses of the bead makers and their workers on the island's east and north sides. In the mornings, smoke rises from the furnace chimneys across the entire island simultaneously. 20, perhaps 25 active furnaces in a good working season, and the smoke drifts south toward Venice in flat layers when the wind is from the north, which it is for much of the winter. From the highest point of the island, which is the bell tower of Santa Maria e San Donato, you can see in 4 directions: Venice to the south, the open lagoon to the north and east, and the marshlands and distant mainland to the west. You climbed that bell tower once as a boy and have not been up it since. You have heard of an earlier case, not recent, perhaps 15 years ago, in which a maestro was found in Padova attempting to make arrangements for passage north. What happened after the finding was not spoken of directly. What you know is that he did not return to the island. You do not know if that means he escaped further, or if it means something else. The official language of the Republic is careful and precise, and says very little about specific outcomes. You hope Benedetto got far enough. You don't know what far enough means in this context. You don't know if there is a distance that constitutes safety when what you carry is not gold or documents, but knowledge that lives in your hands and cannot be left behind when you go. Benedetto carries his formula for the ochre. He carries the proportions, the temperatures, the behavior of his specific batch in his specific furnace over 20 years of accumulated conversation between his hands and that particular clay and that particular fire. In a foreign city with a foreign furnace trying to reproduce it, the sand will be different, the soda ash will have different impurities, the clay of the crucibles will respond differently to the heat, and the ochre that was perfectly his own on this island may not exist in exactly that form anywhere else. Knowledge made of hands is not fully portable. It is partly the place, partly the materials, partly the specific relationship between a maestro and the particular world his furnace has made. You have thought about this, not because you are planning to leave. You are not planning to leave. You have thought about it in the abstract way that a person sometimes contemplates the nature of his confinement, simply to understand it more clearly. What you know is inseparable from where you know it. If you left this island and this workshop, you would take the knowledge, yes, but you would take it into a world of different materials, different temperatures, different clay, different sand, and the work of a lifetime of calibration to this specific place would have to begin again, differently, in a foreign furnace that does not yet know your hands. You do not say any of this to anyone. The room is quiet. Katerina is asleep, or close to it, her breathing slow and even in the dark. The furnace is banked. The 11 goblets are in the annealing oven. The children are sleeping. There is nothing more that needs doing tonight. You lie down, and the cold of the sheets moves through the blanket and then slowly stops moving as your body claims the space beneath it. This is the same exchange that happens every night. The sheets cold at first, then warm. The body taking back from the air what the day cost it. You know this exchange the way you know all the exchanges that make up a day of work. It is not comforting exactly, it is simply reliable. And reliability after a long day is its own kind of rest. The breathing in the room is slow. Katerina is beside you. Faint from upstairs, the lighter breathing of the children. Your shoulders soften. The ache in your right shoulder, the rotation arm, and in your left forearm from the sustained reach into the glory hole. The thickened skin at the base of your right thumb where the pipe rests. These are familiar, these small records of the day. They do not demand anything from you now. They are simply there, quieter already than they were an hour ago, banking down the way the furnace banks down in the night hours. Let your eyes rest where they are. The ceiling of this room is the same ceiling it has always been. The same slight darkening in the plaster near the window where moisture comes in during the worst of the autumn rains. The same grain in the wooden beam above the door. You have looked at this ceiling on every night of the 19 years you have slept in this room, through every season, through every mood the day deposited. and it has never required anything of you. It does not require anything now. The glass in the crucibles is moving, not quickly. Glass above its melting point moves in its own time, thick and unhurried, turning against the walls of the clay crucible in patterns that have nothing to do with your intentions or your schedule. When you are not there, the glass does not know you are absent. It moves because it is hot, and that is the only reason glass at working temperature needs. You can let it move without you. Tomorrow morning you will be at the workshop before the light. You will go to the annealing oven first. You will look at 11 goblets through the inspection port, one at a time. You will be looking for hairline fractures along the base ring, for rim splits, for the surface bloom that sometimes appears when the cooling rate was slightly uneven. Most of them will be whole. They were well made. The morning will tell you which ones survived the night and what the day's work will be, whether you make one more piece to replace a failed one, or whether the commission is already complete in the oven, and the morning is simply a verification of what you already know. But that is tomorrow. Tonight, the 11 pieces are in the oven, holding whatever they hold, and there is nothing you can do to help them or hurt them now. This is the thing about the annealing oven. It requires nothing from you once the piece is inside. The temperature holds without your management. The cooling will happen at the rate it happens. You chose the piece's fate before it went in, with the care you brought to the making of it. The wall thickness, the rim, the soundness of the glass. Whatever is inside the piece is already inside it. The oven only reveals what is there. You made 11 pieces with the care you always bring. You closed the port. It is enough. The island breathes around you in the dark, not metaphorically. The island exhales heat into the February night from 20-some furnaces banked to their maintenance temperatures, and this warmth, distributed across the small landmass and its canals, makes Murano in winter marginally warmer than the open lagoon around it. Not noticeably warmer, not enough that you would feel it crossing from the open water to the shore, but the heat is there, rising from the workshops where men have worked all day and now sleep, as you sleep, with the fire banked on the other side of the wall. Your father slept this way, his father before him. The same fire, in a sense. Not the same fire literally. Wood burns, coals go cold. The furnace is rebuilt from scratch every few years when the clay lining degrades and must be torn out and relaid. But the knowledge that tends the fire is continuous. The hand that banked the furnace tonight learned from the hand that banked it 40 years ago, and that hand learned from the hand before it, and back through the 2 centuries since the Senate's decree moved the furnaces here. That line of knowledge runs through you. It will run through Marco if you teach him well, through Giacomo in time if he continues as he has begun. You are a link in something long. Let that rest where it is. The warmth at the edges of the blanket, the sound of the water against the foundation stones of the building, steady, barely audible. The particular lapping sound of shallow tidal water against mortared stone that you have heard every night of your life on this island, and that you hear now without effort, without naming it, simply as the sound the night makes here. Beyond the canal, the workshop breathes. Beyond the workshop, the next canal, the next workshop, the next maestro, asleep or close to it, having banked his own furnace, having made his own pieces, having sent his apprentices home. Beyond the canals and the workshops, the lagoon. Beyond the lagoon, Venice. The lights there are faint tonight, a smear of gold at the horizon, nothing more. And beyond Venice, the world that receives what this island makes, the courts and counting houses and patrician palaces, where a goblet travels from your hands through the hands of intermediaries into the hands of a person whose name you will never know, who holds it to the light and sees the white threading spiraling through the clear walls and sees something beautiful and does not know and will never know the name of the island or the name of the man whose hands made it. This is all right. It has always been all right. You made the piece as well as you could make it. The rest is not yours to carry. Slower now. The ache in your shoulders is very quiet. Your right thumb at rest. Your forearms at rest. Your eyes, which have looked into furnaces and across morning glass and down the walls of 12 goblets today, at rest. Let them close if they want to. The glass is moving without you in the crucibles, without urgency, without purpose, simply moving because it is warm, because warm things move, because this is the nature of the material, and the material does not need you to remind it. You do not need to be anywhere tonight. The furnace is banked. The pieces are in the oven. The island breathes in the dark as it has breathed every night since the furnaces were moved here. And the fire that runs through the workshops of this place is the same fire that taught your father's hands and will teach your apprentices' hands, and has nothing to do tonight with anything you need to manage. Let it burn without you. Let the oven hold what it holds. Let the water do what water does against the stone at night. You are 38 years old. You know something that lives in your hands and will be there in the morning. And tonight, for now, for this quiet hour on this small island in the northern lagoon, you can sleep. This has been Quiet History at Bedtime. If you found something here tonight worth staying for, please subscribe, leave a like, and turn on notifications. This channel is still very new, and every one of those things makes a genuine difference. New stories are coming. Thank you for being here tonight. Sleep well. Good night.